Iowa football has a new QB1. Brendan Sullivan is the starter at the top of the depth chart and an injury to Cade McNamara. We talk quarterbacks. We talk with Scott Docterman today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked on Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked on Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we heard from Kirk Ferentz today and kind of an instant reaction right after the press conference is wrapped up here. We'll dive a little bit deeper into things for tomorrow's show, but want to get some opening statements out there from what we heard from Kirk Ferentz in the press conference here today. It was something that we were definitely anticipating what was going to be the conversation about the quarterback position. And we'll definitely break that down. Some other injury concerns for Iowa. Also today, I want to talk a little bit about what's left for Iowa to play with. And we'll hear from Scott Docterman from The Athletic as we do every week. But the quarterback position, it is the most important position in sports. And it is definitely the top topic here today for Hawkeye fans. I know across the state and across the country, wondering exactly how this is going to play out. And very simply, Cade McNamara was concussed. And, yesterday on the show, I was wondering, thinking back to the play where he was crunched down, right? He was laid out on that fluttering pass, the wounded duck that he threw that was picked off, but eventually came back because of a roughing the passer call. If that was a play that he was concussed. And then I saw a picture yesterday. Rob Howe had it, who takes pictures for Hawkeye Nation and does some other work. And he had a still photograph of the pick six. And right after he threw the pass, McNamara was hit from behind. And it wasn't helmet to helmet, but there was helmet contact, kind of the back of his head. So regardless if it was one way or the other, Kirk Ferentz mentioned today, really, it was during halftime, it sounded like, when it became apparent that there was something going on. And that's the interesting part about concussions. There's a part of it, how are you allowing him to play if he did have a concussion? But if there's no symptoms, if he doesn't say anything, you're not going to know. If he was checked out at halftime, so be it. It's just such a delicate situation. And concussions are a delicate topic, as we know, and as we've learned throughout the years in football. This is a brain injury. And for any knucklehead that's saying, well, just get back out there, you just got dinged. Look, this is not old school football. This is not when I played football. This is not when you played football. This is a new era for the better. It's not. Give him some smelling salts, get back in there. We know how devastating that it can be. We know that CTE is a real thing. There's a ton that happens here. So when we're talking about concussions, let's just simply not just use the word concussion. Remember, it's a brain injury. That out of the way, we move on. Cade McNamara is not going to be able to go this week. And it goes to Brendan Sullivan. And we'll get to Brendan and what I think they need to do with him a little bit, though that may change because Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, he asked the question about the backup, who on the depth chart is Marco Lainez. We saw Marco a little bit at the end of the bowl game, that disaster a year ago. He was in there. He looked quick. Didn't look like he do much throwing the football, but that's what they had. And gave you a little excitement at the end of a blowout and at the end of the season. Well, he's banged up. And Kirk's response was not exactly a thrilling one. It was not one to say, all right, they're ready to go with Lainez. You remember they brought in Jackson Stratton as a walk-on transfer quarterback. Jackson Stratton, though, not a guy that's done a ton. He was at Colorado State, big size, California kid. Numbers, not great by any means during his time collegiately. If it's not him, who else? James Rezar is the true freshman. He's not, as we told you weeks ago, a quarterback anymore. He's been practicing wide receiver. And on top of it, he got hurt. So you cross that one off. I mean, how deep down, if there is an injury to Brendan Sullivan and Lainez isn't available, deep down are they going to have to go? It is a scary proposition suddenly at this quarterback position. I remember years ago, Virginia, I think, had a year where they were playing a linebacker at the quarterback position. Quinn Schulte, he played quarterback in high school. Who else? You got some names, throw them in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at Trent Con if you got some names. If we get to the emergency quarterback situation. Now, of course, a year ago was easy, right? It's Cooper DeJean. He's played for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's not going to work. Who else is there if we do get to that spot? Because, boy, whew. And that leads to this week and what we're going to see from Brendan Sullivan. Limitations as a passer. I don't think there's any doubt. But you can still do plenty of things with him. But with a compromised quarterback room, if Lionez can't go, we know McNamara is not going to go. Rezar is not there anymore. He's a wide receiver and hurt. Jackson Stratton went 4-17 with 2 interceptions in his 1 year playing at Colorado State. 4-17 passing. Sounds like a line we saw from the backup quarterback a year ago for Iowa, but that aside. Whew. Does that mean that Iowa is going to try to keep Brendan Sullivan out of harm's way? That's my concern with this, because Brendan Sullivan's at his best when he's playing with reckless abandon, right? When he's out there getting involved in things and he's being a lead blocker on a little pass out to Johnny Pazguzzi and he's running the football and putting his head down and mixing it up and being a football player. That's when Brendan Sullivan's at his best. You don't have him at his best if you're not able to use him in the way that he's best equipped. I don't know if we're going to get a true read. And the other question that's out there is if he is QB1 for the rest of the season. Look, very simply, if he goes out there and he plays terrible, if he has a bad game and McNamara's ready next week, you anticipate that McNamara's going to get the job back. But if they go out, they beat Wisconsin, Brendan Sullivan even plays adequate, okay. Goes 9 of 15 for 110 yards, throws a touchdown, runs for another, has 50 yards. You got to keep him out there, right? Except we're talking about Kirk Ferentz. We'll see. We'll see. The injury front is getting stacked. No McNamara this week. Reese Vanderzee, as we talked about, he is going to be out. Addison Estrenga is still out. Lachey is banged up. Stevens is working his way back on the offensive line. That's a help. No John Nestor again this week. It's a walking wounded unit. And suddenly, it's crazy. Just a couple of weeks ago, Kirk Ferentz was talking about this is one of the healthiest teams that they have had. He's trying to talk it into existence. Don't say that. Don't say that. He said it. And now Iowa is really banged up. We talk with Scott Docterman from The Athletic as we continue here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. A lot of Iowa football talk with Doc as we roll through on the Tuesday edition. Stay right there. We're back with more in a moment. Hey, Hawkeye fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you could direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player that you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going. You even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, I'm supporting Caden Weechin. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Caden Weechin the love and keep him connected to our school. Remember, Caden, he's suddenly got another year of eligibility. We found that out the other day. Hey, that's a good thing. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and make sure you enter the referral code Locked On, and you're entered. Already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more information. Roy, support the players, change the game.
How are you, Scott Docterman?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you today?
Doing well. Doing very well. Obviously, we saw a different offense not through the air necessarily, but when Sullivan is in there, he just brings so much more athleticism to the position than McNamara can. I heard after the game, and I'm sure that you were probably down there listening to the same soundbite as it was happening as we were when Caleb Johnson was talking about just how different it is and how much how the holes were bigger when the quarterback's a threat to run the football. It sure seems like Brendan Sullivan and the Hawkeye offense has turned a page. Do you expect to hear that tomorrow when Kirk Ferentz meets the media?
Yes and no. I expect it to happen. I expect Brendan Sullivan to be the quarterback, but I also know how Kirk hedges these things, and he doesn't quite give everybody what they're looking for. So I expect a frustrated fan base. Where he'll say, well, we're still evaluating everything and we're going to take it, look at it in practice and take it day by day. And everybody's going to throw their pencils in the air and they're going to go, come on, just say it already. And then ultimately, I think they'll end up making that move because Caleb Johnson was right. I mean, what I noticed, I went to the game, I wrote about it. I advocated for making that change permanently because one thing I noticed that Northwestern knows him as well or better than Iowa does. And that is they changed the way that they spread their defense. When Cade McNamara was in there, they largely played 7, 8, sometimes even 9 people within, 5 or 6 yards of the line of scrimmage, the tackle box. When Brendan Sullivan was in there, they spread them out. I mean, a lot of times it was 6 players in the tackle box. And that's really what opened up the running game because then they were able to get to their gaps and there was a little more space. And then, of course, because all that was predicated on respecting Brendan Sullivan's running ability. So I think he brings more to the table. And if Cade McNamara was a better passing quarterback, then you can make a case for some sort of a half and half situation because we didn't get to see it the other day, but Brendan Sullivan isn't exactly the best passing quarterback.
Right.
But overall, when you have that ability, you've got to exploit it because right now they're just getting next to nothing from that position.
Speaking of getting next to nothing, for a long time, they were getting next to nothing down the field. And McNamara, though nearly overthrown, did hit Anderson for a big play, had him in the end zone and overthrew that one. The speed component, that's something they don't have. Jacob Gill's not that guy. Weechin, they didn't even play at wide receiver on Saturday. They don't have a speed component at the wide receiver position. How important is that for Seth Anderson? And now with Sullivan in there, taking a couple of shots a game down the field just to stretch out that defense.
It's something that you want out of your team. I think it's not the most important factor. I mean, something that I think most Iowa fans would love to see because nothing really energizes the crowd more than a big home run shot that works. But overall, they just need to be more consistent in the passing game and make the makeables. And once they can do that with this running game, because this is. It kind of cracks me up when people are talking about the offensive line not being very good. I'm like, have you seen their numbers? I mean, they're running the ball. They're the best running team in the Big Ten by far. And when you look at, what they're doing, sacks allowed, I mean, they're at a much better stage than they were a year ago. They've only allowed 9 sacks in 8 games. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So when you have those elements and you can run the ball and make the makeables in the passing game, then you can open up the big plays down the field. And, whether Brendan Sullivan can hit them or not, or Cade McNamara doesn't, or it would, that remains to be seen. But I do think just simply hitting those, the passes that you're able to hit that you should hit, that should be prerequisite number one.
I want to talk about the punter before we run out of time because Reese Dakin, I saw a tweet yesterday. I think it was John Miller that put it together. It's identical to what Tory Taylor was doing in his freshman campaign. If anything, Dakin's numbers are even a touch better than Tory Taylor in his first year at Iowa. Reese Dakin, who had maybe a little bit of a rough start, has certainly figured it out and is certainly winning over the hearts of Hawkeye fans, seemingly.
He should be. He's been fantastic for Iowa this year. I mean, this is part of the reason why Iowa went to Pro Kick Australia to grab a punter. Because of the way, and then they got one that obviously has a tremendous leg. I mean, his leg strength is comparable to that of Tory Taylor. And you look 8 punts, the other day averaged almost 45 yards. 4 were inside the 20. I mean, there were ones that, he hit several that were inside the 10. I mean, it was just he's a weapon, just like Torrey was. And at this stage of what Iowa's doing, and yesterday, 2 days ago, they played a terrific defensive game, but that just adds another first down or two that the offense has to get against a pretty good Iowa defense for the most part. So he's been a weapon, and I expect him to continue to grow in that role as the years come.
Speaking of that defense, we were joking earlier, it would not have been fun to be a member of that defense during practice, I'm going to guess, last week after the performance against Michigan State. And Phil, he's a yeller, and I'm sure he had a lot to say on the practice field a week ago. You put the caveat on, it was Northwestern. This is a bad Northwestern offense. But in that performance, they pitch a shutout, even though there was 14 on the board. A lot of good vibes, a lot of good feelings there. And Jay Higgins, boy, he is going to be one of those guys that we're going to remember for a long time. His dad's a part of it, who's a character of his own right. But, boy, Jay Higgins, what a performance again Saturday.
And to come off of somebody like Jack Campbell, who is just, the Marlboro man out there and just does so many things for Iowa, but did over the years and be that kind of a talent. But for Jay to come in and be just as productive in his own way, and he has a completely different personality where, Jack is a little bit more of an introvert. He even admits it. He doesn't really like to talk. He's just kind of that strong, silent type. Great athlete, but Jay is so extroverted. I mean, he's just a guy that, everybody gravitates towards. And for him to be able to do what he did and had that interception kind of Josie Jewell had one in the Big Ten championship game like that 9 years ago. It's crazy for me to think, but somebody kind of compared those two. And I think that's really an apt comparison, Jay Higgins and Josie Jewell, that they just really are a lot alike and in the way they play. Certainly not, Jay's a lot more boisterous as a person, but, he's the heart and soul of this defense, and he's just he's been a true treasure to cover. I really enjoy being around him, and I'm glad his personality is what it is.
How much difference did Sebastian Castro bring to Parker's defense?
He's the glue. To play that position, it's the most versatile position on the defense, and for him to step in there, it solidifies everything because. He's got a really tough position because playing that cash, you're a slot corner, you're a Sam linebacker, you're a nickel corner. You've got all these different responsibilities, and for him to just seamlessly go in there and play that position and play it so well, it allows everybody else to just not even worry about it and do their own thing. And he does everything the right way. So. It's hard to say how good it was the other day because they were playing against, probably the worst offense in the Big Ten and Northwestern, but still, you got to go out and win those games. And he was tremendous that day and really helpful.
Playing for the Bull on Saturday against Wisconsin. The Badgers come into town with, once again, a good running back. They have flipped the script. It was Braden Locke making mistakes against Penn State, or they very well could have won that football game. Is it kind of morphing back into same old Wisconsin? Is that what you expect to see Saturday night?
I think that's going to have to be what they want to do because, when you do have somebody like Braden Locke, who is the backup quarterback for a reason, his numbers are really comparable to what you see with Cade McNamara. He's a little bit better athlete, I would say, but overall, he's completing less than 58%. He's got 7 TDs, 6 interceptions. They can't afford for him to get trapped against Iowa's secondary because that can really turn the wrong way very quickly for him. And then Iowa would, has a running game this year, which last year had one big run against Wisconsin. That was it. And they know that could be a cumulative effect through the course of 4 quarters. So they're going to have to run the ball. And I expect that they'll do a decent job of this, but they're not built the way they used to be. They're not, bringing in, going 12 or 22 personnel with a fullback, 2 tight ends. One of them is probably an offensive lineman and blowing people off the ball. But that said, Ty Walker is really good. He's got 10 touchdowns this year. He's, ran for 600 yards. He's a legitimate running back. So I would expect it to be comparable to where it's a field position game between these two programs. As always, highly competitive. And this is kind of, now you're kind of in the best of the second tier stage for Iowa and Wisconsin. You've got Illinois in there, Nebraska. And so you want to kind of feel your way through as you enter the final month of the season.
Doc, just real quick on the conference overall, the beat goes on for Indiana. Rourke sounds like he's going to be back. Ohio State struggled against Nebraska. I thought Nebraska could have won that football game. Penn State, do they have a quarterback controversy going into the Ohio State game? I mean, that kid, Bo, how do you say his last name? Prabula, something like that?
Yeah.
He played very well when he was in there. How's Franklin going to handle that? This conference at the top, Doc, fun to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I wrote about that today. It's just, there's like a foursome that have really, that are in a first tier that are elevated themselves above everybody else. And Ohio State has by far the most difficult schedule in that pad out of those four. And playing, Penn State this week. I mean, they have issues with their offensive line. Penn State, Drew Aller is going to try to practice tomorrow, but he's a game time decision. James Franklin said today. Ohio State, losing its first and second team left tackle, that could be a problem. But Penn State hasn't been a real great pass rush team this year. Now they may take advantage of that, in their case with Abdul Carter maybe lining up over left tackle and go over there. But Ohio State's at a little bit of a disadvantage because it has a loss, and playing, say Penn State and Indiana could give them all they want. What they showed the other day is they're vulnerable. Everybody thought that they would smoke Nebraska, but Nebraska came out and played well. They've got a good team. I think it snowballed on them a little bit in Indiana. I think you'll see a different Ohio State team come Saturday, and it remains to be seen. Will Penn State still have that kind of mental roadblock that Ohio State provides for them year after year in that game? But Indiana, to me, is, we're not really putting them in the top echelon because of their name,
right? But
they play like they're the best team in the league.
Are you making your way to Kinnick Stadium, or are you getting sent out in that fun trip out to State College this weekend?
Not going there, thankfully, because that's a disaster road trip. Yes. That's like crossing the Rhine in 45. But I would say, I'm going to be at Kinnick. I don't want to miss Iowa, Wisconsin. That's one of my favorite games every year. I like caveman football, so I want to see the bowl. But I am going to write about the Cyclones this week, so I'm excited about that too, because they, as we know, and as I'm sure you guys are going to talk about it, later on, it's they have an outstanding chance to really put themselves in that conversation for being even an at-large, should it not work out with the championship.
Good stuff. Scott Docterman from The Athletic. Doc, what else will you be writing about this week other than Iowa State?
Yeah. I wrote today about the foursome at the top of the Big Ten and how they've separated themselves to what's ahead. I'm writing about Iowa now having to be one of those teams that has to reevaluate its goals now that it's gone. There's no division play. There's no CFP. Now what? And then I'm also looking ahead at Iowa State. And on Wednesday, I'm looking back at a lot of the different seasons that could have used a playoff. 1966 comes to mind. 2004, some other years. So I think, so I'm kind of all over the place, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Good stuff, Doc. You be in Ames tomorrow then?
No, I'm going to stay here, but I hope to talk to a few players.
Good stuff. Thank you, Doc. We'll talk to you next Monday. Appreciate you coming on.
Okay. Have a good one.
Thank
guys.
you, Scott. Scott Docterman from The Athletic.
Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Love having that information in front of you, and not just the NFL. They got you covered with college football. Iowa now down to just a 3-point favorite at home against Wisconsin. Certainly the quarterback news has something to do with that. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. That's FanDuel.com. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So I get this question. What's left to play for? Who cares, right? What's left for this football season? There's no college football playoff. There's no Big Ten championship game. There's no divisions anymore. What is left to play for? Well, a couple of major things. Kirk Ferentz run the table. Will tie Woody Hayes for the most wins in Big Ten history. That's something. With it, he would be eligible, even if they would lose the bowl game, for the College Football Hall of Fame. On top of it, if retirement's looming and that's hanging out there, and you're maybe one of those people that is hoping for a retirement, maybe that would be a nice safety net that would be there. Look, the Iowa football team next year is going to look a whole lot different. Bringing back all these guys in their bonus COVID year changed the equation and certainly changed expectation for this team and what they're going to be. You did not get many reps out of the developmental guys, the guys that you anticipated you're going to see this year. And though it might help in the here and now, the future, well, we have a whole lot of we don't know. This very well could be Iowa's last chance to have even a 9-win season. The schedule gets more daunting. The roster is going to be a whole lot different. And I just can never wrap my mind around people that don't want to see your favorite team win. There are no draft picks that are attached to Iowa if they tank. This is not professional sports where they're going to be able to suddenly go out there and because they didn't play well, get a 5-star. That's not how this works. Keep stacking up those wins. Keep getting the victories. This team's not going to quit. One thing we learned from Kirk Ferentz teams, they're not going to quit. Can they be outmanned? Can they be outplayed? Absolutely. But they will not quit. Keep it going this week against Wisconsin. We're going to start talking more about the Badgers this week, get into the matchup a little bit more. Looking forward to one of my favorite rivalry matchups of the year, Bucky Badger and Herky going up head-to-head for the Bowl. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.